Humans, how are we doing today? I wanted to talk about a study that came across my desk actually earlier this morning. And I want to talk about it on a couple of fronts. And we're going to go into a lit review and we're going to make some pretty practical recommendations. So, the reason I want to talk about this particular study is threefold. One, it addresses thermoregulation and the effects of training in temperate versus hot climates. Two, we are going to talk about glucose consumption and oxidation through exercise. And three, if you are like me in Adelaide right now, it's XCM season. So it's cross country marathon season. And I want to talk about glucose and nutrition while racing, and I want to make that differentiation from the get go. We are not talking about day to day nutrition, we are talking about race day nutrition. And the reason I want to talk about that is because I think there's a lot of people, particularly in the grade levels, that really just don't take it seriously. And whether that's just because they're only there for enjoyment or whether they just don't care, but it is really low hanging fruit that can get you probably, if you take it seriously, it'll probably get you another place up in the results. It might get you on the podium. It might get you from B grade to A grade if you start to take things seriously. So anyway, getting straight into it. Carbohydrate but not fat oxidation is reduced during moderate intensity exercise performed at 33 versus 18 degrees at match heart rates. So this particular study was ridiculously simplistic, but gives us a bunch of really fascinating information. So essentially what they did was they had a bunch of Hubbards come in. Well, actually, I shouldn't say Hubbards. They had a VO2 in the 60s, 65s, I think. So they were reasonably well-trained cyclists. They had them come in and they did a 90-minute time trial at 95% of the heart rate associated to the first ventatory threshold. So this is our basic coffee ride, cruisy bunch ride, just endurance pace. So this is just our normal, just conversational pace. They had them do a test at 18 degrees in the chamber, and they recorded the results. Then they had them come back a week later and repeat the exact same protocol, the difference being that this time they did it at 33 degrees and a 60% relative humidity. So, what did they find in all of this? Basically, what they found was somewhat unexpectedly was that our power numbers were higher in the temperate group than the heat group, the 33 degrees, and that was pretty much across the board. If we look to the graph on the right, we can see that was pretty much across the board for the whole 90 minutes. So first we'll just talk about recommendations from this. This might just sound like a yeah, wahoo, okay, we thought we knew that already. When we're thinking about our training zones and prescribing our training zones, particularly for those people that are choosing to follow a very polarized training approach, your ventatory threshold or your lactate threshold will be higher in the temperate or the colder conditions, and it will be lower in the hot conditions. So again, if you're in Adelaide, we're going into winter now. If you're in Australia, we're going into the Southern Hemisphere winter. Unfortunate, it happens, it sucks, but it's part of life. You may be thinking right now, you might be looking down in your bunch ride, looking at your power meter going, oh, wow, look, there's all this power's coming. Where's all this power coming from? My training must be going rad. Yeah, your training may be going rad, but it also might just be an environmental factor that's allowing you to put out more power than what you did, essentially during Tour Down Under, for example. Now, there were some other really interesting findings that I wanted to discuss here, and this will lead me to what I wanted to talk about in terms of the cross-country marathon races that are happening here in Adelaide at the moment. So if we look at the graph on the left here, mean carbohydrate oxidation rate in grams per minute. Now, this is what the study found was with less power, there was less carbohydrate oxidation. So that was the result of the heat, the warmer environment. But what they also found is in the temperate conditions, carbohydrate oxidation rate was up closer to around 2 to 3 grams per minute. So I want you to think about that for a minute. If we are on average, and remember these guys are chucking out around about 200 watts for 90 minutes, so not crazy power. If we're burning about 2 grams of carbohydrates per minute, that means in order to maintain a carbohydrate or a glucose balance in our body, we need to be consuming roughly about 120 grams of carbohydrate per hour. Now, if we come over here, this is a really nice literature review from Podlegar and Wallace. I know Tim well. Tim is an exceptionally talented academic. New Horizons in Carbohydrate Research and Application for Endurance Athletes. So the first thing I wanted to scroll down and show you guys here, give me a second, this always takes longer than what I first anticipated. Tim came up with this really nice chart here. Okay, so for rides in less than 90 minutes in a moderate zone. So remember, if we're talking a 3-zone model, we talk in moderate, heavy, and severe. Again, that's a conversation for another video, but I typically only refer to a 3-zone model. That might be the academic in me. For rides under 90 minutes, before the ride, low to moderate carbohydrate intake, so a banana, a sandwich, something like that. During the ride, no carbohydrates required. This is where Dan Plews would talk about right nutrition, right time. However, for rides exceeding 90 minutes, we will need a moderate to high carbohydrate intake. Now, let's bump that up into our heavy and our severe zones. So typically when we're racing a cross-country marathon race, we're going to be bouncing between those heavy and severe zones. So heavy being when we're just tapping along, we're going to be at a maximal lactate steady state. And severe will be when, for example, Fox Creek this weekend, we've got the dynamic tension climb, which has a lot of switchbacks on it. So you're probably bumping up into that severe range coming out of those switchbacks. Okay, so from here, Tim's recommendation is a high amount of carbohydrate. So when we come down to our recommendations, okay? Furthermore, athletes looking to benefit from carbohydrate feeding during exercise in the up to 60 grams per hour. So Tim likes to recommend between about 60 and 120 grams per hour, depending on which one of his studies you're reading. Combinations of glucose and glucose, sorry, I can never pronounce that, or glucose fructose, with the latter blend affording the greatest potential flexibility across a range of intakes. Okay, so basically what they're saying is that you want a high quality gel or drink to consume while you're out riding. Now, this is where the practicality of this becomes challenging. If we're in, say, an Ironman triathlon, getting carbohydrates down our throat is a relatively simplistic task. We're on our time trial bikes. It's not a particularly technical course most of the time, compared to cross-country riding anyway. So this is where it becomes really critical to think about your fueling strategy prior to any race. So what do we come up with here? Not sponsored. Martin, if you're watching this video and you want to send me a couple of boxes of gels for the shout out, I won't say no. So when we talk about a high quality gel, the Martins are pretty much the gold standard at the moment. They're easily obtainable. You can find them online. They're not cheap, but they will help. You need to be consuming probably about 2 to 3 of these per hour. So every time you come out into the tech feed zone, you need someone handing you a gel. Whenever you're on a flat, straight section of trail, you need to be getting a gel out of your pockets. You can also add to this drinking any kind of fluids that you can get your hands on. So typically what I like to do, I actually keep it fairly simplistic. I just have old school Gatorade on the bike, but you can definitely do better than that. Make sure that you have all that readily available, because you will be amazed at how challenging it actually is to stay up around that sort of 60, 80, 100 grams of carbohydrates per hour. Anyway, that is the extent of today's video. I hope that you gained something from that. The thing that the take-home message that I'd like you guys to understand is that this is more important than you think. If you think that I'm just a club racer, I'm just doing this in C grade, it doesn't really matter. Guess what? It probably matters more to the club racer than what it does the elite level racer, because those bioenergetic or oxidative pathways haven't been as significantly developed. That's it. That's my video for today. I hope you gained something, and I look forward to talking to you soon. Oh, and I better say this before I leave. All the algorithms are screwed across all the platforms, so please like, comment, share with your friends, do all that kind of stuff. Cheers. Thanks a lot. Talk soon.